I'm Christ and Disciple, and we're going to talk a little bit about Superman's limitations, how Zack Snyder was able to show the limitations of Superman and to bring forth certain questions to the program. I just finished watching Man of Steel. I was just watching Prime, his channel, talking about David Zaslav, the direction for the DCEU, and some exciting stuff like the air cut and so on. But I watched Man of Steel almost the entire movie again today. In the middle of all the other things I was doing, I was kind of watching it, stopped watching it, doing what I was doing, watching it, stopped watching it, doing what I was doing. Right. Shout out to everybody out there. Hope you guys are having a good day. And no, my last video, I was talking to you guys about how I responded to an individual who he was trying to say that Zack Snyder's Superman was an imperfect, sort of Christ-like figure, which is not true at all. I want to talk about the limitations of Superman, and why I talk about this is because Superman can't save everybody. He can't. You know, it's just physically impossible for him to save everybody. Though he saved the world many times, he was not able to save every single individual in the world. Right? And he can't. When Jesus was on earth, he while he died on the cross and saved whoever believes in him will be saved, Jesus himself has not saved everybody. Moses himself hasn't saved everybody. Saving events, but it's still to some degree up to the individual, and also just that Jesus couldn't physically save everybody. He couldn't be everywhere at once, like God is. Similarly with Superman. So depending on an issue where he may have could only save one of, say, several people, he has to decide who he's going to save and who he's not going to save. Now, let me say first of all, this is a very uncomfortable topic for almost everybody. Now, when we have seen Superman in movies, we've seen Christopher Reeve's version of Superman, we've seen Brandon Routh's version of Superman, and in movies only, we've seen Henry Cavill's version of Superman. Now, Brandon Routh and Christopher Reeve were playing the same character, the same Superman, but never was that Superman challenged and his limitations tested. Furthermore, both the Brandon Routh Superman and Christopher Reeve Superman lived in a world which was not grounded in our kind of reality. Okay? The reality today, both Superman characters was built around a naivety of society. Okay? Because back in the 70s and 80s, there was a certain naivety to people. And then in the 2000s, people were still kind of sort of naive about Superman. All right. Now, Zack Snyder, his Superman, lives in a world like ours. And in our world, all actions have consequences. All actions. No matter the intention, all actions have consequences. So, the difference between Zack Snyder's Superman and the Superman we've seen relayed by Brandon Routh or by Christopher Reeve isn't the character Superman or his moral compass. Zack Snyder's Superman is the same Superman as Christopher Reeve's Superman, is the same Superman as Brandon Routh's Superman. Superman that Zack Snyder showed us never changed from who he was. What changed was the world he was in. Let me say it again. Brandon Routh Superman, Christopher Reeve Superman, and Henry Cavill Superman are very much the same Superman, meaning their moral fabric, their the way how they care about themselves, their principles. It's all the same. Because all three Supermen come from Middle America. They all came from Kansas. Middle American values. That's what Superman had. However, the world that Henry Cavill Superman is like our world. And as a result of that, and because he's grounded in our world, his limitations are tested. So unlike Christopher Reeve Superman and even Brandon Routh Superman, Henry Cavill Superman has been the Superman that has been most tested in all of the Superman we've seen. Tyler Hoechlin's Superman is a much more grounded Superman as well for television. I must say, I saw a few little clips of Tyler Hoechlin's Superman. I'm very impressed that they take the character of Superman and they built off of Henry Cavill's Superman, which is very impressive. Very impressive. Because it shows the development of pathway, and Tyler Hoechlin's Superman shows that he's not, how do I say it? He's grounded and he addressed the issues of today, on today's world. Now, it's still somewhat artificial, you know how people accept, but remember, Tyler Hoechlin's Superman has been Superman much longer than Henry Cavill's Superman has been Superman. In fact, I would go as far as to say that I think Tyler Hoechlin's Superman is a follow-up Superman to the Henry Cavill Superman. Okay? So it's pretty impressive to see the director of this particular series, because Tyler Hoechlin's Superman has children, and even though the series is still not as grounded and it's somewhat, they bend reality, what's the word we use, suspend reality for a minute in those films, you can still see that the series is much more grounded, and I like that. Now, let's go into the limitations of Superman, and let's go into the limitations of his source material. That is, I'll refer to it as the Jesus Christ, the Moses sources, the Samson sources. Okay, this is where Superman is a strong man. Superman, is built off of the Jesus Moses model. And I'm going to show you how very similar this Superman is. Like I said before, Jesus Christ cannot save everyone. And it sounds weird, but here's what I mean. He died for everyone. But he cannot make up everyone's mind. So some people will choose to receive him, and some people won't. And those people who won't, Jesus can't save them because they've made up their minds. So Jesus he will not save everyone, though he has put out his sacrifice to save everyone. Moses couldn't save everybody. In fact, only the second generation of people were able to make it into the promised land. Moses himself didn't even make it into the promised land. So Moses did not save everyone either. Samson didn't save everyone either. Okay, so what I'm saying is, no hero. And in Wonder Woman, we got that breakdown at the end of Wonder Woman, where she was saying that she couldn't save mankind. It was up to mankind to choose what they wanted to do. So Wonder Woman understood by the end of her story that as much as she's this Messiah and Savior, she can't save everyone. All right? No Messiah can save everyone. I want you guys to understand that, because it still comes down to choice. It still comes down to choice. Will you choose these virtues or not? Right? Okay, so but back to my point on Superman. Superman is put into several dilemmas. Several dilemmas. Dilemma number one. He is sent to the Capitol building. I will go to BVS first, and then I will work my way back to Man of Steel. I'll talk about his father. I'll talk about the children in the bus. All of these are very uncomfortable topics for people to talk about with Superman because a lot of people think Superman has a limited power. He has unlimited strength. And they believe, and this is why they think Superman is boring for some reason, they believe Superman can do anything. So as a result of that, they go into this fantasy where once Superman's there, everything is all right, which is the kind of fantasy that everyone has about Superman. Of course, we have all had the dreams where we were flying and defying gravity, which is the selling point of Superman 1979. Okay, but getting back to my point at hand about Superman and his limitations, which is very important to understand. These limitations make a lot of people uncomfortable because now they have to go back to reality. Zack Snyder took Superman and put him into our reality. Now, of course, it wasn't Zack Snyder that did that. It was David Goyer. That was his baby. This was his brainchild. Superman's really David Goyer's brainchild. Zack Snyder just made it a reality and put his own spin on it. But it's really David Goyer's brainchild. Now, this is a very uncomfortable topic. Superman cannot save everyone. It is a very uncomfortable topic because it tests the limitations of Superman. In deconstruction of heroes, which is what Zack Snyder kind of did with Man of Steel, and then he went into BVS and did it a little bit more, you're putting these heroes into situations which test the limitation to their philosophy of life, to how people perceive them, etc., etc., etc. In the case of Superman, Superman went through a number of situations that tested his limitations, of which we just said, Superman cannot save everyone. He just can't. He's just one individual. And no matter how fast he can move, we have learned that Superman, in order to not go crazy and also not to be hurt and in great pain, has to focus on a particular thing. If he doesn't focus on a particular thing, all of that stimuli and all the things going on around him will drive him crazy. Okay? And we saw that in Man of Steel. But let's go back to BVS, like I said before. Let's go to the court bombing, where Lex Luthor put a bomb inside of Wallace Keith's wheelchair, which, by the way, was lined with lead. Superman cannot see through lead, as we all know. So he could not see the bomb. Therefore, he couldn't save the people. Right? It was a setup, and it was perfect. It was a perfect setup. This situation broke Superman. It wasn't that how the world perceived him was not such a big deal for Superman. The big deal for Superman was when he couldn't save all those people in that building from the bomb. Okay? Now, Superman knows he has limitations, but Superman, the Superman that we know, at least the Zack Snyder Superman version, when he feels he can save somebody, he tries to. Okay? And we've seen from Man of Steel, we've seen that Superman can't help but help people. He lives to help people. He does that all the time. And you see that same thing in his father, his adopted father, Jonathan Kent. Instead of Clark going to save the dog, Jonathan Kent heads right back in there to save the dog. And he puts the child there. Now, Clark could have gone and saved the dog, which would have made more sense. But Jonathan put himself in danger to help others. And you saw Jonathan lead out, helping other people to get to the overpass. Now, so Clark grew up with that kind of model set by his parents, middle American parents, They set the example. You can see they cared about him. They also took necessary precautions to keep him from hurting other people. At the same time, Clark just can't help himself. Everywhere he goes, he leaves a paper trail of people he helped, and sometimes used his powers in extraordinary ways to help other people, and then got the jet out of there, right? Now, so it's a given that Clark helps people. But as much as Clark wants to help as many people as he possibly can, he cannot help everyone. And we saw that limitation in Man of Steel, but I want to go back to BVS for a second. In BVS, we found out a limitation of Superman. He cannot see through lead. And we saw this in the Capitol bombing. We saw this with Batman when he used the lead smoke screen, right? Kryptonians can't see through lead. They can see through a lot of things, but for some reason, that metallic compound, maybe how the electrodes are arranged in it, they cannot see through lead. All right? Now, why this is interesting is because this is a physical block and limitation of Superman. It's a limitation. And it proves the point that Superman cannot save everyone. And that's why I wanted to go to BVS particularly in this case. He cannot save everyone. However, Superman can save people. And he can save the world because he has potential abilities that he can holistically save people. But to say he can face each and every individual is impossible. There are crimes committed right now as I'm speaking here, crimes all over the world being committed. And people are dying all the time. Tremendous war crimes and all kinds of crimes are happening. Superman's just one individual. He can't split himself into a million different pieces, and no matter how fast he moves, he cannot get to every single crime and every single. Now, pay attention to what I'm saying. Doesn't mean he doesn't hear all these screams of horror and pain when he's not totally focused in on whatever he's doing. He absolutely can. Which leads to the second question. How does Superman prioritize, as in BVS said, who he helps and who he does not help? And that's a great question. And Zack Snyder said that when he was flying in to save Lois, they actually had him hearing all these crimes and all these other things, and he prioritized his focus on Lois, and so he was able to get to Lois. Otherwise, he would have been sidetracked, and he would have gone after he'd have gone after different people. But Lois is falling; she's screaming as she's falling, and he can hear her. But so he's thrown in on that, but he can hear a whole bunch of other things. And think about this: all these competing people for your help, you have to prioritize, and that's another limitation on Superman. So it's very uncomfortable talking about this because for many people, because it takes you out of your comfort zone for how all encompassing and how powerful Superman is. And we saw in Superman, the first Superman movie, if I'm not mistaken, with Lex Luthor, we saw Lois Lane die. She got crushed in a car, and Superman couldn't save her. And he lost all hope and everything. And then they made him spin. He made him fly very, very fast, so he turned back time, kind of like what the Flash did, but much more wonkier, and brought Lois back to life. Okay? But my point anyway is this, that they had to bail out that situation. How was Superman going to handle that? Now, in Man of Steel, we learn that this is at the stage where Clark has to keep his powers a secret because he doesn't know who he is at that point in time. He's still developing as a person. He needs to be protected from the government, from people at large. They can't know that he's not human, that he's an alien. It has to be kept a secret. And the reason this makes sense, some people don't think it makes sense, but it absolutely does, is if you go and watch Christopher Reeve's Superman, the story of Christopher Reeve's Superman, again, Superman is not displaying his powers as he's Clark Kent when he's a child. He outruns trains and stuff, gets there before other people, but he's not really trying to display his powers in the open. You know, he's not doing it in school. He's not using his powers and abilities. And the reason is because if he does that and everybody knows he's an alien, it draws attention to him, and he can be in, he can end up being, in a sample lab somewhere. Okay, so Superman had to keep his identity secret, and his father said something which was again very uncomfortable for all of us to hear. People would think even morally wrong, but it's not. Clark's father told him under no circumstances is he to use his powers till he knows who he is and what his purpose is in life. Because Clark didn't know who he was. He didn't know he was an alien. He didn't know he came from another world. He thought maybe God did something to him, right? So, by the time his father started explaining to him and revealing to him that, his earthly father, excuse me, Clark began to grasp that he needed to find out who he really was. And during those periods, now, let me just give you an analog so you will understand. Moses didn't know who he was for a very long time. He was raised by his parents, then given back to Pharaoh's daughter. He was ruling in Pharaoh. He was in Pharaoh's court and everything. He didn't know exactly who he was until much later on when he found out. In the meantime, his identity as a Hebrew was not revealed at all. Pharaoh's daughter kind of kept that on the D-low. You look at Jesus. When Herod was trying to kill his children, Jesus and his family fled him into Egypt. And Jesus was kept on the D-low until he was a big man. When he was 33 years of age, 33 years old, that's when Jesus came out and started his ministry. You look at Clark, same thing. When he reached 33 years of age, that's when he was called out by Zod. By then he knew who he was, what his purpose was, and now he could face the world. So when his father said, don't use your powers, and Clark says, so I was not supposed to save them? I'm just to let them die? And his father says, maybe. You have to understand, every bone in Clark's body is to help people, right? But his father wants him to have discipline and to reel him in. So let's just make this abundantly clear. Superman. What I mean by that is Clark will help people regardless. Clark can't help himself. He can't stop helping people. That's just what he does. And even when he let his father die, which is a horrible thing to say, but his father was so hell-bent and adamant, it's his father's wish. His father said, don't use those powers. Don't reveal yourself right now, son. That's too much of a risk. I prefer to die here than have you, this is very important that you get to know who you are and so on, and the government doesn't come and take you, and then they got, they experiment on you and stuff like that. His father didn't want him to have and this is how parents are. Parents will sacrifice themselves so that their children could have a better life. And it's crazy because his father wasn't his real father, and they were just having that discussion. And, he's crying out, Dad! But his father said, no, don't save me. And Clark honored that. He honored his father. And it's the very words his father said to him before about just letting them die. His father was willing to pay the ultimate price and actually follow up on his own words. It's crazy. His father had a twisted, sprained, or broken ankle. And Clark obviously looked behind him, and he was ready to go. This is go time. Now you got to understand how traumatic that was for Clark. You know, because Clark felt he was capable of saving his dad. The thing about it is he would have brought so much attention to himself. We don't know what would have happened because I don't know where they were. They were in Kansas, but were they in Smallville? That's the question. And you know that whole incident, we saw what happened when he saved the kids in the bus. From that incident, the rumor spread that he did something like that. People thought he was, was God working through him or something. And then the kids decided to test him, and they started bullying him as a result of him saving the people in the bus. Which is, again, people hate what they don't understand. They fear what they don't understand. And Clark, you know, they were always watching Clark like sideways, because he always doing these unbelievable things, but nobody can really pin it down. You know what I mean? Or there was this unbelievable stuff happening around him. So basically, Jonathan Kent sacrificed his life. This was not Clark's decision to not save his father. This was his father's decision that Clark honored to keep himself a secret. And in other words, to show you Superman has limitations. Superman can't just come out and say, I'm Superman, I'm Kal-El from Krypton. How you guys doing? He can't do that. All right? And this is Superman across the board. So what Zack Snyder did was he put that to the test. He broke it down and he showed a demarcation. This is what they mean by deconstruct. He showed a demarcation. This is the limit of Superman. Okay? And it's very important for me to say that because this is what some people who are traditional Superman fans say they hate Zack Snyder's Superman for. When in fact, this is the weirdest thing ever, Superman that Zack Snyder directed is not his Superman. It's David Goyer's Superman. Okay? It's David Goyer's vision and David Goyer's Superman that Zack Snyder brought to life on the screen. Okay? But let me just make it abundantly clear that Christopher Nolan and David Goyer's Superman, actually. Let me just make it abundantly clear once again that those limitations of Superman are important to understand because this is what it would be like if Superman existed in our world. Okay? In our world, we wouldn't accept a Superman. We wouldn't. First of all, Uberman, aka Superman, would be a strongman. And from what we all know, strongmen, if we look at strongmen in the world today, we're talking about Putin. We're talking about the Korean czar of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, the Filipino president. These are strongmen. They're the top podunk guys. There's a monopoly. They are the czars. Okay? They make the decisions. They make the choices. Ultimately says them. The world doesn't look too kindly on them. And what's the funny thing about this is, is that a monolithic rulership or one-man leadership, there's nothing wrong with that. We've had kings from way back in the day. England still has a queen. So a one-man rulership is not the problem. The problem really, democracy is not the problem either. The problem really is this person a tyrant, a totalitarian? Is this person someone who oppresses the people around him and not leads with love, compassion, allowing people to contribute to the equation, even though you have the final say? So it's not democracy or it's capitalism or communism or socialism. That's not the issue. Is there compassion and love? Is there concern and consideration in the leadership? This is the important thing. All right. But back to my point. So Superman or Uberman is a strong man. It's a strong man. I'm gonna say it again. Superman, Uberman is a strong man like Samson. The Victorian garb, the Victorian underwear on the outside is strong man underwear. Superman's supposed to be a strong man. Now, can you imagine a strong man like Kim Jong Un or Vladimir Putin? I don't care what message he's giving. He just intervenes, and saves people. It doesn't matter what part of the world. You think that's cool? No, of course it's not. We'll all be watching at this thing and be like, oh my, is there any checks and balances for this guy? Who does this guy answer to? You don't care if he's doing good or not. And he's an alien? You know why? The Pentagon's come out and said, there aliens exist and blah, blah, blah. But before even that, I think UFO, sorry. But anyway, whatever. My point is, they keep this alien thing under wraps even to this day with the public. If the public was to know this, they'd go nuts. So my point anyway is this. When you put Superman in a real environment, you get challenges. And then there was this whole discussion in BVS over Superman. You know, some people see him as a messianic person. Should we be telling him what to do? If he's a messianic person from, with superior intelligence, we always felt we were the center of the universe. Now it seems as though there's Superman to challenge that. The dilemma about should Superman intervene to try and help save people across, state lines and country lines and so on. And, Senator Finch says he shouldn't work unilaterally. He should kind of work in conjunction with the governments, coordinate with the leadership of different countries. Every act has a consequence. Every act is a political act. It's just a lot of things to consider when you're thinking about such a person existing in our world. And that's beautiful because now we were able to see, a much more realistic portrayal of Superman in our world. How our world would more realistically react to a Superman. They wouldn't laud him and worship him. Well, some people would. But for the most part, it's going to be a mixed bag until people are able to see he's not a threat. The point being that that's a limitation in and of itself because people always look at Superman as, easily accepted because it's Superman we're talking about, right? But Superman's not even a man. And if that real scenario was to happen tomorrow, if there was to be some superpower being that does not answer to anyone, starting to run things in this world, people, first of all, to shake up the system, and a lot of people will want to get rid of that, especially the beneficiaries of the system. So, take that with a pinch of salt. Going back to Man of Steel and then jumping all the way to Zack Snyder's Justice League. First, Man of Steel, we saw that Superman had limitations. Limitations in terms of when you were dealing with a hell-bent, vindictive person who has been gutted to his soul, and his soul's been taken from him as General Zod, and a superior fighter to you, you're going to do some damage. Now, the majority of the damage that happened was because of the world engine. But in the fight with General Zod, Superman can't control where the fight takes place. If you're losing the battle against this dude, and this dude's beating you up and beating you up all the way up into space and then beating you up all the way back down, you're just fortunate you went through a building, both of you, and you were able to get the upper hand, on him in the subway. But the point is, Superman was put into a difficult position with Zod. Zod, within a couple of hours, was able to adapt to the Earth and optimize his ability. And if Zod had stayed around a little longer, he would either kill Superman and then wreak havoc on the world, or he would wreak havoc on the world, at large. So thank God Superman was able to kill him. Again, a lot of people don't realize that Superman has limitations. He's not a Zen. He can't Jedi mind trick you. He can't do those things. He can't. So he had to beg Zod, and when Zod was hell bent on doing what he was supposed to do, he broke his neck. Okay? So Superman's not omnipresent. Two, Superman has weaknesses. He can't see through lead, he's vulnerable to magic, and so on and so on and so on. So there's the limitations. There's another limitation to Superman, which is, like I said before, whoa, man, I'm yawning. Um, Superman is someone who can't save everybody. He just can't. Not every individual can't. Just one Superman we have. So, and then he has to keep his identity a secret, which is why he ended up not saving his father. So these are just some of the things about Superman that make him have limitations, and I think this is what rubs people the wrong way. Let's go to Zack Snyder's Justice League for a minute. In Zack Snyder's Justice League, Superman comes back from the dead. Doesn't recall who he is. When he finally does recall who he is, realizes he has a purpose. You know, they brought him back for a reason. Superman attacks Steppenwolf. He kind of saves the day for Cyborg somewhat, but he still can't save the day. Because eventually the world explodes and they all die. But thankfully for the Flash is able to pull back time. In other words, Superman, as strong and as powerful as he is, couldn't stop the from getting to the Unity and then blowing up the place. Right? But he was able to help Cyborg when Cyborg was separating the mother boxes. He was able to help and assist, different people. And that's the thing with Superman. So Superman is trying to inspire people. He's always looking to help. He's very hopeful. And that's what Superman brings to the table. So, as we go on and on and on, we'll see more and more Superman be what a lot of people think he should be. But more importantly, how the world reacts to him will be more in line with what people know the world to react to him with. If you look, the world was very uniform in reacting to his death, especially when his name was cleared and Lex Luthor in the papers was convicted of the Capitol bombing. So that's what I got for you guys. There's a lot more I wanted to talk about, but I'll talk about that some other time. I think I need to go to sleep. I'm going to catch you guys later. I am Christ I am Disciple. Don't forget you can donate via PayPal. My PayPal link, it should be in the description below. Have a good one, people. Blessings to you.